Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Call. The vanilla cake sat half-eaten on the picnic table, pink frosting smeared across paper plates decorated with cartoon princesses. 5-year-old Emma, Paul Kemp's daughter, laughed as she chased her cousin around the backyard of his sister Michelle's sprawling ranch house in Miller's Creek, 30 miles outside Denver. The September sun cast long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawn, and Paul felt the rare warmth of a peaceful Saturday afternoon. His sister Michelle stood by the grill where her husband Daryl Wagner flipped burgers, her smile tight as she watched the children play. Something about her expression had seemed off all day, but Paul chalked it up to the stress of hosting a 6-year-old's birthday party. Paul's phone buzzed in his pocket. Connie's name flashed on the screen. "Hey, babe, where are you?" His wife's voice cut through, sharp and breathless with panic he'd never heard before, not even when Emma had fallen from the monkey bars last year. "At Michelle's house. We're at the birthday party for her. Get out now with our daughter." Paul's military training kicked in immediately, the casual afternoon atmosphere shattering like glass. His body tensed, eyes scanning the property with new awareness. "Why? What's? Just do it now." Connie's voice cracked with urgency. "Don't ask questions. Don't say goodbye. Get Emma and drive away. I'm calling the police." "Paul, please." The line went dead. Paul's heart hammered, but his mind went cold and clear, the same calculating calm that had kept him alive during 6 years in Army intelligence. He pocketed the phone and walked toward Emma with measured steps, keeping his expression neutral. "Emma, sweetheart, come here for a second." "But Daddy, we're playing." "Now, baby girl." His tone left no room for argument. Emma's face scrunched in confusion, but she ran to him. Paul scooped her up in one fluid motion, her party dress billowing. "Paul," Michelle called from the grill, her voice strangely sharp. "Where are you going?" "Emma's not feeling well," Paul lied smoothly, already moving toward the side gate. "Might be the sun. We're going to head home." Daryl Wagner turned from the grill, his muscular frame blocking the light. His jaw tightened. "Leaving so soon? The party just started." "Yeah, sorry about that." Paul kept walking, Emma in his arms, moving faster now. He caught Michelle's eyes and saw something there that made his blood run cold. Fear and guilt. "Paul, wait." Michelle started forward, but Daryl grabbed her arm. Paul didn't wait. He broke into a jog, then a run, hitting the driveway at full sprint. Emma squealed, thinking it was a game. His black Ford Explorer sat at the curb, baking in the sun. As Paul fumbled with the door handle, Emma secure against his chest, he glanced back at the house. That's when he saw it. A white panel van was pulling up to the front of Michelle's property, moving slowly. Too slowly. The kind of deliberate approach that predators use. Through the windshield, Paul caught a glimpse of 2 men in the front seats. The driver wore a black tactical vest, but that wasn't what made Paul's stomach drop. Behind the van, a dark SUV idled at the corner with its engine running. And standing in Michelle's driveway, partially hidden behind the garage, was a third man speaking into a radio. The man looked up, saw Paul, and his hand moved toward his waistband. Paul yanked open the Explorer's door and threw himself inside, still clutching Emma. He hit the locks, started the engine, and slammed his foot on the accelerator. The tires screamed against asphalt as he peeled away from the curb. In the rearview mirror, he saw the white van surge forward and the man in the driveway, running toward his own vehicle. "Daddy, you're scaring me." Emma's voice trembled. "It's okay, baby. It's okay. We're going on an adventure." Paul's hands were steady on the wheel as he took a hard right, then another left, weaving through the residential streets of Miller's Creek. His mind raced faster than the speedometer. What the hell was happening at that party? His phone rang again. "Connie." "I'm out," Paul said immediately. "We're clear." "Oh, thank God." Connie's sob of relief cut through the line. "Paul, I found something." Her voice broke. "Your sister, Michelle and Daryl, they're involved in something terrible." "I know. I saw men arriving. They were waiting for something." Paul checked his mirrors again. No one following yet, but he wasn't taking chances. Where are you? Home. I called Detective Aaron Sullivan. Remember him from your unit? He's with Denver PD now. He's coming here. Paul, you need to come home, but make sure you're not followed. What did you find, Connie? Silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. When Connie spoke again, her voice was hollow with horror. They were going to take Emma, your sister's husband. Paul, Daryl Wagner has been kidnapping children from wealthy families. Michelle found out 2 days ago, and the birthday party today. Her voice broke completely. Emma was supposed to be the next target. Paul's hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. The world seemed to tilt sideways, reality rearranging itself into something monstrous. His sister, his own sister, had known, had invited them anyway. Daddy, Emma's small voice pulled him back. Why are we running? Paul met her innocent eyes in the rearview mirror and forced a smile. Because Mommy misses us. We're going to surprise her. But in his mind, a cold certainty was forming. Daryl Wagner had made the mistake of threatening Paul Kemp's family. And Paul Kemp wasn't the kind of man who forgave that. He was the kind of man who made people regret ever being born. The game had just begun, and Paul intended to win. Chapter 2. Pieces of the Puzzle. Paul took an indirect route home, doubling back 3 times and watching for tails. Emma had fallen asleep in her car's seat, exhausted from the party excitement and the adrenaline crash. By the time he pulled into their driveway in the Cherry Creek neighborhood, the sun was setting, painting the sky blood red. An unmarked police car sat at the curb, Aaron Sullivan's vehicle. Paul grabbed Emma carefully and carried her inside. Connie met him at the door, her face pale and streaked with dried tears. She pulled both of them into a desperate embrace, and Paul felt her whole body trembling. It's okay, he murmured into her hair. We're safe. Aaron Sullivan stood in their living room, still wearing his detective shield on his belt. At 42, Aaron had aged well since their Army days. Same sharp eyes, same solid presence that had made him a damn good intelligence analyst before he joined Denver PD. His expression was grim. Paul. Aaron shook his hand. I need you to tell me everything you saw. Paul laid Emma on the couch, covering her with a blanket before joining Connie and Aaron in the kitchen. His wife's laptop sat open on the counter, several manila folders spread beside it. Start from the beginning, Paul said quietly, his voice deadly calm. How did you find out? Connie wiped her eyes and pulled herself together with visible effort. Paul had always admired her strength. She was an investigative journalist, used to digging into dark places. But this was different. This was family. 2 days ago, Connie began, her voice steadier now. Michelle called me. She sounded strange, panicked. She said she needed to tell me something about Daryl, but then she just clammed up and hung up. Said she'd made a mistake calling. And you investigated, Paul said. I couldn't let it go. Michelle has been acting weird for months, ever since March. Remember when we had them over for dinner and she practically jumped every time Daryl looked at her? Paul remembered. He'd thought it was marital tension. So I started digging into Daryl Wagner's background. Connie opened one of the folders. Paul, your brother-in-law doesn't exist before 2019. Aaron leaned forward. What do you mean? I mean, Daryl Wagner has no digital footprint before 6 years ago. No social media, no job history, no credit cards. He appeared out of nowhere, met Michelle at some charity event, and married her within 8 months. Connie's hand shook as she pulled out printed documents. But I have a friend at the DMV who owed me a favor. I got his fingerprints from his license application and ran them through a private database journalists use. She slid a photo across the counter. Paul stared at Daryl Wagner's face, but the name underneath read, Glenn Lambert. Wanted for questioning in connection with the 2018 disappearance of the Moreno family in Texas. Jesus Christ, Aaron breathed. It gets worse. Connie opened her laptop, showing them a news article from 3 years ago. The Moreno family, parents and their 7-year-old daughter, vanished after a children's birthday party in Houston. No bodies were ever found, but the FBI suspected it was connected to a kidnapping ring. The parents were wealthy. They received a ransom demand for $2 million. Paul's jaw clenched. Did they pay? Yes. And the family was never seen again. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Paul's mind was already connecting dots, building a profile of the man who'd married his sister. There have been 4 similar cases across 3 states in the last 5 years, Connie continued, pulling up more articles. Always wealthy families. Always children kidnapped from social gatherings, birthday parties, barbecues, weddings. The families pay the ransom, and then... She couldn't finish. They're killed anyway, Aaron finished grimly. To eliminate witnesses. Paul's vision tunneled, fury building white-hot in his chest. But he kept his voice level. How did you connect this to today? Connie met his eyes. This morning, I broke into Michelle's house. Connie, I had to, Paul. She was acting so strange, and with what I'd found about Daryl. I waited until they left to set up the party, and I used the spare key from under their garden gnome. She pulled out a phone, not her own. I found this in Daryl's office drawer. A burner phone. She played a recording of a voicemail. A gravelly male voice said, Wagner, we're set for the Wagner kids' party. Target is confirmed, Paul Kemp's daughter. 5 years old, wealthy family, he'll pay big. Roy's bringing the van and the equipment. We grab her during the chaos, same as always. You keep the sister busy, clean and simple. The date stamp on the voicemail was from yesterday. Paul felt something crack inside him. Not break, but transform. Like ice forming over water, hard and cold and unforgiving. There's more, Connie whispered. She scrolled through text messages on the burner phone. Daryl, or Glenn, or whoever he really is, has been planning this for weeks. He has a partner named Roy Snow and at least 2 other men working with him. They've done this before, Paul. Multiple times. And Michelle. Her voice broke. Michelle found out 2 days ago. She confronted Daryl, and he convinced her to stay quiet. Threatened her. But she also... Connie's face twisted with anger and disgust. She also didn't warn us. She let us bring Emma to that party. Paul looked at Aaron. You verified this? I ran the name Glenn Lambert through our system the moment Connie called me. He's wanted in 3 states for questioning related to kidnappings and extortion. There's no direct evidence linking him to the murders, but Aaron's expression was dark. The FBI's been looking for this guy for years. He's smart, careful, changes identities, moves every few years. And if he's working with a crew, they're probably just as bad. Paul's mind was already moving, planning, calculating. 6 years in Army intelligence had taught him how to think like the enemy, how to anticipate moves and counter them. And, more importantly, it had taught him how to disappear people who needed disappearing. What's the plan? Paul asked quietly. Aaron hesitated. Officially? I've called this into my captain. We're putting together a task force with the FBI. They'll pick up Wagner, Lambert, and his crew within the next few hours. And unofficially, Aaron met his eyes, and something passed between them. The unspoken understanding of men who'd served together, who'd operated in the gray spaces where the law couldn't always reach. Unofficially, Aaron said slowly, these guys are ghosts. If they catch wind of law enforcement, they'll vanish. We might never find them. And they'll just set up shop somewhere else, target some other family. He paused. But I didn't tell you that. Paul nodded slowly. How long do I have before your task force moves in? I told them we had to be careful, plan the raid properly. 48 hours minimum. 48 hours. Paul could work with that. Connie grabbed his arm. Paul, what are you thinking? He looked at his wife, then at his sleeping daughter on the couch, innocent and unaware of how close she'd come to being ripped away from them. How many other children had Glenn Lambert taken? How many families had he destroyed? I'm thinking, Paul said quietly, that Daryl Wagner made a mistake targeting my family. And I'm going to make sure he never gets the chance to hurt anyone else. Aaron closed his notebook. I need to go coordinate with my team. Paul, be smart. Don't do anything that'll put you in a cell. After Aaron left, Connie turned to Paul, her eyes searching his face. What are you planning? Paul pulled her close, kissing her forehead. I'm planning to protect our family. That's all. But in his mind, a plan was already forming. Cold, methodical, and absolutely ruthless. Glenn Lambert wanted to play predator? Fine. Paul Kemp would show him what it felt like to be prey. Chapter 3. The Hunter Becomes Hunted. The next morning, Paul sat in his home office with 3 laptops open and a secure satellite phone on his desk. Leftover equipment from his intelligence days that he'd kept, just in case. Emma was safely at her grandmother's house in Boulder, and Connie was at the newspaper office, maintaining appearances while feeding him information. Paul had spent the entire night working, and now he had a complete picture of Glenn Lambert's operation. It was more sophisticated than he'd expected. Lambert had been running this kidnapping scheme for 7 years, not 5. The earlier cases had simply never been connected. He'd worked his way across the Southwest, each time creating a new identity, insinuating himself into wealthy communities through marriages or business partnerships, and then striking at vulnerable targets during social events where security was lax. His crew consisted of 3 men: Roy Snow, the muscle; Eddie Gorman, a tech specialist who handled communications and surveillance; and Marshall Hurd, a former paramedic who kept the victims sedated during transport. They were all professionals with prior criminal records ranging from armed robbery to assault. Michelle was the weak link. Paul's sister had genuinely fallen for Lambert's charm, had no idea who she'd married until 2 days ago when she'd accidentally discovered the burner phone. Lambert had threatened to kill her if she talked, but she'd called Connie anyway, a last-ditch attempt at warning them that she'd lost the courage to follow through on. Paul felt a complex mix of emotions toward his sister. Anger, yes. Betrayal, but also pity. She was a victim too, in her own way. Still, she'd stayed silent. She'd let them bring Emma to that party. That couldn't be forgiven. Not yet. Paul's phone buzzed. A text from Aaron. FBI raid scheduled for tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. They're watching the house now. Don't make waves. Paul deleted the message and made his own call. It was answered on the second ring. Camp. Didn't expect to hear from you. The voice on the other end belonged to Gene Fleming, a former CIA operative who'd gone private sector. He ran a security consultation firm that operated in the shadows, providing services that law enforcement couldn't or wouldn't touch. I need a favor, Fleming. Must be serious if you're calling in markers. Life or death. Paul explained the situation in clinical terms, leaving emotion out of it. Fleming listened without interrupting. So you want me to what, exactly? Fleming asked when Paul finished. I want you to spook them. Make Lambert think his operation is compromised, but not by law enforcement. Make him think a rival crew is moving in on his territory. Fleming was quiet for a moment. You want to flush them out. I want them scared and desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. And then I'll be waiting. Fleming chuckled darkly. You've got 48 hours before the FBI moves. I can have my team in position by tonight. But Kemp, this kind of operation doesn't come cheap. Bill me. I don't care what it costs. Done. Send me everything you have on Lambert and his crew. Paul transferred the files and hung up. Then he made a second call, this one to a local number. Paul. Michelle's voice was small, frightened. We need to talk. In person. Today. I can't. Daryl doesn't let me go anywhere without. Your husband is a kidnapper and a murderer, Paul said flatly. And you knew he was planning to take my daughter. So yes, Michelle, you can find a way to meet me, or I can tell Aaron Sullivan that you're an accessory to attempted kidnapping. Silence. Then, quietly, where? The old warehouse district near Union Station. Abandoned building on Wawata Street. 1 hour. Come alone. Paul hung up before she could respond. He knew Michelle would come. She was too desperate, too guilty, too scared not to. 60 minutes later, Paul stood in the shadows of an abandoned warehouse, watching his sister climb out of her BMW and look around nervously. She'd aged 10 years in the last few months, her face gaunt and her eyes hollow. When she saw Paul emerge from the building, she flinched. Paul, I'm so sorry. I wanted to warn you. I tried to. Stop. Paul's voice cut through her excuses like a blade. You let me bring my 5-year-old daughter to a house where men were planning to kidnap her. You sat there serving cake while your husband arranged for our family to be torn apart. Don't talk to me about trying. Michelle's face crumpled. He said he'd kill me. He said if I told anyone, he'd make it look like an accident. Paul, you don't understand what he's capable of. Actually, I do. Better than you. Paul pulled out his phone and showed her photos of the Moreno family, the disappeared parents and child from Houston. Your husband killed these people. and at least 8 others across 3 states. He's a monster, Michelle, and you protected him. I was scared. So was I. But I didn't stand by while someone threatened my family. Paul's eyes were cold. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to help me. Help you do what? Take him down. Permanently. Michelle shook her head frantically. I can't. If Daryl finds out I'm talking to you. He won't. Because you're going to act normal. You're going to go home, and you're going to tell him everything's fine. And tonight, when his crew shows up to discuss their next job, you're going to unlock the back door. Paul, no. I can't. Yes, you can. Paul stepped closer, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. Because if you don't, I'll make sure the FBI knows you were complicit in attempted kidnapping. You'll go to prison, Michelle. You'll lose everything. Or, he paused. You can help me stop them, and maybe, I'll let you disappear afterward. New name, new life, somewhere Daryl's friends can never find you. Your choice. Michelle stared at him, tears streaming down her face. Paul felt no sympathy. His sister had made her choices. Now she'd have to live with the consequences. What are you going to do? She whispered. Whatever it takes to make sure they never hurt another family. Michelle closed her eyes. When she opened them, something had shifted. Resignation, maybe, or desperate hope. Okay, she breathed. Okay, what do you need me to do? Paul smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. First, you're going to tell me everything about Daryl's operation. Every detail, every meeting place, every plan, every weakness. And then, Paul pulled out a small device from his pocket, a listening bug. You're going to wear this. For the next hour, Michelle talked. She told Paul about the storage unit where Lambert kept surveillance equipment, about the cabin in the mountains where they'd planned to take Emma, about Roy Snow's temper, Eddie Gorman's gambling debts, Marshall Hurd's addiction to prescription pills. She told him about Lambert's paranoia, his escape plans, his contacts. And most importantly, she told him about the meeting scheduled for tonight at 10 p.m. All 4 crew members would be at the house to discuss moving up their timeline because of Michelle's suspicious behavior. They were getting nervous. Good. Nervous criminals made mistakes. When Michelle finally left, Paul sat alone in the warehouse and called Aaron Sullivan. I need you to delay the FBI raid, Paul said. Paul, I can't. 24 hours. That's all I'm asking. Tell them you need more surveillance, more evidence. Something. Aaron was quiet for a long moment. What are you planning? Justice. The kind that sticks. Paul, if you cross certain lines. I'm not going to kill anyone, Aaron. I'm just going to make sure that when your FBI raid happens, they find enough evidence to bury Lambert and his crew for life. Evidence that can't be disputed or lawyered away. And how are you going to get that evidence? Paul smiled grimly. By giving them exactly what they want. A target they can't resist. He hung up before Aaron could argue further. By nightfall, Paul had assembled everything he needed. Surveillance equipment, tactical gear from his Army days, and one more critical piece of the puzzle. Gene Fleming's team was in position around Michelle's house, waiting for Paul's signal. At 9:45 p.m., Paul sent Michelle a text. Back door. Leave it unlocked. At 10 p.m., Lambert's crew began arriving at the house. Roy Snow's pickup truck, Eddie Gorman's van, and Marshall Hurd's sedan. Paul watched from across the street through night vision binoculars. At 10:15 p.m., Paul slipped through Michelle's back door. The game was in motion, and Glenn Lambert was about to learn that Paul Kemp wasn't prey. He was the apex predator. Chapter 4. Inside the Lion's Den. Paul moved through Michelle's house like a ghost, his military training reducing him to shadow and silence. The listening device on Michelle was transmitting perfectly. He could hear everything happening in the living room through his earpiece. Lambert's voice. Can't afford any more delays. The Kemp family is spooked. They left the party early yesterday, and Michelle says Connie's been acting strange. Roy Snow's gravelly response. So we move up the timeline. Grab the kid tonight. Too risky, Eddie Gorman interjected. They're on alert now. We should abort. Move to another city. No. Lambert's voice went cold. We've invested too much time here. Besides, I'm not leaving without settling the Michelle problem. Paul froze in the hallway. Through a crack in the door, he could see the 4 men gathered around Michelle's dining room table. His sister stood against the wall, her face pale, the listening device hidden in her necklace. What problem? Marshall Hurd asked nervously. Lambert gestured to Michelle. My darling wife has been making phone calls. Her sister-in-law. 2 days ago, and then again this morning. She thinks I don't know, but Eddie's been monitoring all the house phones. Michelle's voice trembled. Daryl, I was just... Shut up. Lambert's casual cruelty made Paul's hands curl into fists. See, here's what I think happened. Michelle found my burner phone. She panicked. She called Connie to warn her brother, but she lost her nerve. And now she's a liability. Roy Snow leaned back in his chair, cracking his knuckles. Want me to handle it? Not yet. First, we need to neutralize the Kemp family. Paul Kemp's military intelligence. Dangerous if he's figured things out. We need to move fast and hard. Tonight, we hit their house in Cherry Creek. We take the kid, and we take Paul and his wife too. Whole family disappears. No witnesses, no connections. Marshall shifted uncomfortably. That's not the plan. We don't do whole families. Plans change. Lambert pulled out a gun and set it on the table. Anyone have a problem with that? Silence. Then Eddie spoke up, his voice tight. What about the sister? Lambert looked at Michelle with cold calculation. She comes with us. Insurance policy. If anyone comes asking questions, we'll have leverage. He smiled cruelly. After we're done with the Kemps, Michelle's going to have an unfortunate accident. Carbon monoxide leak, maybe. Tragic. Paul had heard enough. He activated the secondary recording device he'd planted in the dining room lamp yesterday. Another gift from his intelligence days. Every word was being captured in crystal clarity, backed up to a secure server that Aaron Sullivan had access to. But Paul wasn't interested in just evidence anymore. These men were planning to kill his entire family tonight. The FBI raid wouldn't happen for another 30 hours. Aaron Sullivan couldn't help him. This had to end now. Paul sent a text to Gene Fleming. Execute Phase 1. 30 seconds later, all the lights in Michelle's house went dead. What the hell? Eddie Gorman jumped up. Lambert's voice stayed calm. Gorman, check the breaker. But before Eddie could move, Paul heard the first crash, one of Fleming's men breaking through the basement window. Then another crash from upstairs. Footsteps pounding. We're compromised. Roy Snow shouted, pulling his own weapon. Lambert grabbed Michelle by the arm, using her as a human shield. Everyone move. Back exit now. But Paul was already blocking the back door, stepping out of the shadows with his own weapon, a Glock 19 from his Army days, legally registered and ready. Nobody moves, Paul said quietly. For guns swung toward him. Paul didn't flinch. Paul! Michelle screamed. Lambert's eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed with calculation. Kemp, should have known you'd be a problem. You threatened my daughter, Paul said, his voice absolutely level. That was your first mistake. Your second was thinking you could kill my family and walk away. Roy Snow raised his gun. Drop it, or I'll... The shot came from a window. Gene Fleming's sniper putting a round through the ceiling 6 inches from Roy's head. The big man dropped to the floor, cursing. Here's how this works. Paul continued, as if nothing had interrupted him. My people have this house surrounded. You're not leaving. The question is whether you leave in handcuffs or body bags. Lambert's jaw tightened. He pressed his gun to Michelle's temple. Or I kill your sister and shoot my way out. Paul's expression didn't change. Go ahead. Michelle's sob was desperate. Paul, please. She knew you were planning to kidnap Emma, Paul said coldly. She let us walk into your trap anyway. She made her choice. So if you want to kill her, Lambert, that's between you and your conscience. But it doesn't change your situation. Lambert's mask of control slipped for just a moment. Surprise, maybe even respect. He'd expected Paul to negotiate, to cave. Instead, Paul was calling his bluff. You're not a cop, Lambert said. You're one man. What's your play here, Kemp? Paul smiled. My play is simple. I prove what you are. I get every single detail of your operation on record. And then I make sure you spend the rest of your life in a cell, thinking about all the families you destroyed. Evidence won't stick. I'm too careful. Are you? Paul gestured around the room. You just discussed murder in my family. Every word was recorded. The device in Michelle's necklace, transmitting to Denver PD. The bug in that lamp, backed up to federal servers. And those men attacking the house? Private security contractors who've been documenting every entrance and exit of this property for the last 6 hours. We have video of your crew arriving with weapons. We have your burner phones. We have everything. Eddie Gorman's face went white. You set us up. I gave you enough rope to hang yourselves, Paul corrected. See, here's what you don't understand about men like me. We don't just react. We plan. We anticipate. And we don't stop until the job is done right. Lambert's grip on Michelle tightened. You think you're smart? You think this is over? I have connections, Kemp. People who'll make sure I walk free, and people who'll make sure your family suffers for this. No, Paul said. You don't. He nodded toward the window. Gene Fleming and 2 of his men entered through the shattered glass, weapons trained on Lambert's crew. At the same time, the front door burst open. Aaron Sullivan and 3 Denver PD officers, badges visible. Denver police, drop your weapons. Roy Snow threw down his gun immediately, hands up. Marshall Hurd followed suit, his face pale and sweating. Eddie Gorman just stood there, shaking. Lambert was the last holdout, his gun still pressed to Michelle's head. I'll kill her. I swear I'll. Paul shot him. Not a killing shot. That would have been too easy, too merciful. Paul put a round through Lambert's right shoulder, precisely placed to sever muscle without hitting arteries. The gun clattered from Lambert's nerveless fingers, and Michelle scrambled away. Aaron Sullivan's shout came a second too late. Kemp, stand down. Lambert collapsed to his knees, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. Paul stood over him, weapon still raised. That's for planning to take my daughter, Paul said softly. The rest of your punishment? That's going to last decades. Aaron moved in quickly, kicking Lambert's gun away and snapping handcuffs on him. Paul, you just shot an unarmed suspect. He was armed and holding a hostage. I defended my sister's life. Paul's voice was calm, rehearsed. You saw it. Your officers saw it. Fleming's team saw it. Self-defense. Aaron met his eyes. After a long moment, he nodded slightly. Everyone saw it. Suspect was armed and dangerous, holding a hostage. Officer involved shooting was justified. The other cops moved in, securing Roy, Eddie, and Marshall. Michelle sat on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Paul holstered his weapon and crouched beside her. It's over, he said quietly. I'm so sorry, Michelle choked out. I'm so sorry, Paul. I should have. Later. Paul stood up. Right now, you're going to need to give a full statement. Every detail of Lambert's operation, every victim you know about, every contact he had. You cooperate completely, and maybe the DA will go easy on you. Maybe. Michelle nodded frantically. Aaron pulled Paul aside. We found the storage unit, surveillance equipment, burner phones, records of previous kidnappings. There's enough evidence here to connect Lambert to at least 6 major cases. The FBI is going to be very happy with you. I don't care about the FBI being happy. I care about my family being safe. They are. This crew is done. Aaron lowered his voice. But Paul, shooting Lambert, that was risky. If any of my officers had seen it differently. But they didn't. Paul's eyes were hard. And Lambert will spend the rest of his life remembering that he tried to hurt my family, and he failed. Sometimes justice isn't about prison sentences. Sometimes it's about making sure the bad guys know they lost. Aaron didn't argue. He just clapped Paul on the shoulder and walked away to coordinate with his team. Gene Fleming approached, his expression unreadable. Hell of a gambit, Kemp. You know they could have killed you. They could have tried. Paul watched as paramedics loaded Lambert into an ambulance, still conscious and glaring at him with naked hatred. But I had the advantage. What advantage? I had everything to lose. They just had everything to gain. That's the difference between a hunter and a protector. A hunter stops when the game gets too dangerous. A protector never stops. Fleming nodded slowly. You need anything else from me? Send me the bill. And Fleming? Thanks. Don't thank me. Thank your wife. She's the one who found all this. Fleming gestured to the chaos around them. Cops, evidence techs, the whole operation. Smart woman you've got there. Smartest decision I ever made was marrying her. As Fleming's team packed up and Paul gave his statement to Aaron, he felt his phone buzz. A text from Connie. Is it over? Are you okay? Paul typed back, it's over. Coming home. We won. But as he looked around at the wreckage, at his sister's tear-stained face, at the blood on the floor, at the lives forever changed by one man's greed and cruelty, Paul realized that winning was more complicated than he'd thought. Glenn Lambert and his crew were going to prison. Emma was safe. The immediate threat was neutralized. But there were more battles to come. Lambert had mentioned connections, people who would come looking for revenge. And Michelle, his sister, would have to live with her choices, her cowardice for the rest of her life. The war wasn't over. This was just the first victory. Paul Kemp was ready for whatever came next. Chapter 5. The Reckoning Begins. The interrogation room at Denver PD was sterile and cold, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Glenn Lambert. His real name was actually Clyde Eastman. They'd discovered after running his fingerprints, sat handcuffed to the table, his shoulder bandaged and his face a mask of barely controlled rage. Paul watched through the one-way mirror as Aaron Sullivan conducted the interrogation. Connie stood beside him, her hand gripping his tightly. You should go home, Paul murmured. It's late. Emma's probably asking for you. I need to see this, Connie replied. I need to see him pay for what he tried to do. On the other side of the glass, Aaron was methodically laying out evidence. Photos of the Moreno family, transcripts of the recorded conversations, bank records showing large cash deposits, the burner phones with their incriminating messages. Lambert, Eastman, just stared at the table, saying nothing. Your crew is talking, Aaron said casually. Roy Snow's already confirmed 3 kidnappings. Eddie Gorman gave us the names of your fence, the guy you sold the ransom money to for laundering. And Marshall Hurd? He's telling us about every drop location you've ever used. Aaron leaned forward. It's over, Clyde. The only question now is whether you cooperate and maybe get a deal, or whether you go down for every single murder. Still nothing. But Paul saw the muscle twitch in Lambert's jaw, saw the calculation happening behind those cold eyes. Aaron switched tactics. We found cabin, the one in the mountains where you were planning to take Emma Kemp. Forensics is going through it now. Want to we find DNA evidence from previous victims? Lambert finally spoke, his voice hoarse. I want a lawyer. Smart move. Aaron stood up. But just so you know, the FBI is already connecting you to 9 separate kidnapping cases across 4 states. 9 families destroyed. 23 people dead. You're looking at multiple life sentences without parole, assuming Colorado doesn't push for the death penalty. Lambert's eyes flickered toward the mirror, toward where he somehow knew Paul was standing. Tell Kemp he made a mistake. Tell him there are people who won't forget what he did to me. Aaron followed his gaze. Is that a threat? It's a promise. This doesn't end tonight. Paul felt Connie tense beside him, but he squeezed her hand reassuringly. Empty words, he said quietly. He's trying to scare us. But even as he said it, Paul felt a cold prickle of unease. Lambert was right about one thing. Men like him didn't work alone. They had networks, connections, people who facilitated their crimes. Taking down Lambert was a victory, but it wasn't the end of the story. Aaron left the interrogation room and joined Paul and Connie in the observation area. He's lawyered up. We won't get anything else tonight. You have enough to convict him? Paul asked, 10 times over. Between the recordings, the physical evidence, and his crew flipping on him, he's done. Aaron paused. But Paul, that threat he made, I heard it. We're going to keep a patrol near your house for the next few weeks. Just in case. Connie looked alarmed. You think someone will actually come after us? I think Lambert's an arrogant bastard who's used to getting his way, Aaron said carefully. And I think he's going to be very angry when he realizes his entire operation is destroyed. So yeah, I think we should be cautious. Paul nodded slowly. He'd already been thinking along the same lines. What about Roy Snow and the others? Snow's looking at 20 to life. Gorman and Hurd are cooperating in exchange for reduced sentences, probably 15 years each. They're small fish compared to Lambert. Aaron pulled out a file. But there's something else you should know. We've been digging into Lambert's finances, and we found payments from a shell corporation called Meridian Holdings. Regular deposits, every month, going back 3 years. What's Meridian Holdings? That's the interesting part. It's owned by a man named Jeffrey Leon. Ever heard of him? Paul shook his head, but something about the name triggered a memory. Wait, Jeffrey Leon. Isn't he some kind of venture capitalist? I think I saw his name in the news a few months ago. That's him. Made his fortune in tech startups. Very visible philanthropist, sits on half a dozen charity boards. Aaron's expression was grim, and he's been funding Lambert's operation. Connie's eyes widened. You're saying a wealthy businessman was sponsoring kidnappings? We don't have concrete proof yet, but the money trail is clear. Meridian Holdings paid Lambert $200,000 over 3 years. That's not investor money. That's operational funding. Paul's mind raced. Why would someone like Leon risk everything to fund a kidnapping ring? Maybe he wasn't just funding it. Maybe he was a customer. Aaron pulled out another photo, this one showing Jeffrey Leon at a gala, shaking hands with various Denver elites. Leon's son disappeared 8 years ago. Custody dispute with his ex-wife. The courts awarded custody to the mother, and she took the kid overseas. Leon went public with claims that she was an unfit parent, tried to get the ruling overturned, failed. The kid vanished into the European foster system after the mother died of cancer. Connie made the connection first. You think Leon hired Lambert to kidnap other people's children because he lost his own? I think, Aaron said slowly, that Jeffrey Leon has a very specific kind of psychosis. And I think Lambert was his employee, not his partner. Which means Leon is still out there, Paul finished. And if Lambert's in jail, Leon's operation just lost its primary asset. Exactly. Leon will either cut his losses and run, or Aaron met Paul's eyes. Or he'll come after you himself. You took down his investment. You exposed his operation. Men like Leon don't forgive that. Paul felt the familiar cold clarity settling over him. The same mental state that had kept him alive in hostile territory, that had made him good at intelligence work. Jeffrey Leon was a new threat, one that required different tactics than Lambert's crew. What do you need from me? Paul asked. Stay vigilant. Don't go anywhere alone. Keep him close. And if you see anything suspicious, anything, you call me immediately. Aaron hesitated. Paul, I know you're capable. I know what you did in the army. But Leon isn't some street criminal. He's wealthy, connected, and smart. If he comes after you, it won't be with guns and violence. It'll be legal, financial, political. He'll use the system against you. Then I'll beat him at his own game. Aaron shook his head. That's what I'm worried about. Don't let this become an obsession. You won. Lambert's going to prison. Your family is safe. Don't throw that away chasing ghosts. But Paul was already thinking 3 steps ahead. Jeffrey Leon was a ghost, a shadow financier who'd orchestrated crimes while maintaining a public facade of respectability. Taking him down would require more than physical confrontation. It would require destroying his reputation, his finances, his entire carefully constructed life. It would require turning Leon's own weapons against him. As they left the police station, Connie pulled Paul aside in the parking lot. I know that look. You're planning something. I'm planning to keep our family safe. Paul, Aaron's right. We won. Lambert's going to prison. We can move on with our lives. Can we? Paul gestured back toward the station. Leon's still out there. And even if he doesn't come after us directly, he'll find another Lambert, another crew. More families will suffer. More children will disappear. He took Connie's hands. I can't just walk away knowing that. So what are you going to do? Paul was quiet for a long moment, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. I'm going to investigate Jeffrey Leon. Find his connection to Lambert, gather evidence, and give it to the FBI. Legal by the book. No more shooting suspects. No more personal vendettas. Just information. That's what I'm good at, remember? Intelligence gathering. Connie searched his face. You promise? No more dangerous confrontations. I promise. Paul kissed her forehead. I'm not going to risk losing you and Emma. But I'm also not going to let a monster hide behind money and influence while families suffer. As they drove home, Paul's mind was already working through the problem. Jeffrey Leon was smart, careful, and powerful. But everyone had weaknesses. Everyone made mistakes. Paul just had to find them. The game had evolved. Lambert was the muscle the blunt instrument. Leon was the mind, the architect, and Paul Kemp was going to dismantle his entire operation, brick by brick, until there was nothing left but justice. Chapter 6. Uncovering the Architect. 2 weeks after Lambert's arrest, Paul sat in a downtown Denver coffee shop, his laptop open and 3 different databases running simultaneously. He'd taken a leave of absence from his consulting job. They understood, given the circumstances, and dedicated himself full-time to investigating Jeffrey Leon. What he'd found was disturbing. Jeffrey Leon wasn't just a wealthy businessman with a grudge. He was a calculated sociopath who'd built an empire on suffering. Meridian Holdings was just one of a dozen shell companies, each with different purposes. Some laundered money, others facilitated illegal adoptions, and one, a company called Sanctuary Solutions, appeared to be running a private foster care network. A foster care network with no government oversight, no licensing, no accountability. Paul cross-referenced the locations of Sanctuary Solutions facilities with the kidnapping cases Aaron had connected to Lambert. The overlap was impossible to ignore. 6 of the 9 kidnapped children had last been seen in cities where Sanctuary Solutions operated facilities. They weren't just kidnapping children for ransom. They were keeping them. Paul felt sick. His phone buzzed. Aaron Sullivan. "Tell me you've got something," Aaron said without preamble. "More than something. I got a pattern." Paul sent over the files he'd compiled. Leon's not just funding kidnappings. He's running a shadow adoption ring. The families he targets, they're not just wealthy. They all have custody disputes, complicated family situations, or parents with criminal records. He takes the children, demands ransom, and then what? And then the children disappear into his foster network. New names, new identities, placed with families who pay Leon enormous fees for private adoptions. The ransoms were never the real goal. They were just a bonus. The real money is in selling the children. Aaron was quiet for a long moment. Jesus Christ, how many children are we talking about? Based on the financial records I've accessed, illegally, by the way, so you can't use any of this in court, I'd estimate at least 30 children over the last decade. Maybe more. Paul, if you've been hacking, I haven't hacked anything. I've just followed digital breadcrumbs. Noticed patterns. Made connections. Paul's voice was hard. But here's the problem. Everything I've found is circumstantial. Leon's been very careful to keep himself insulated. Meridian Holdings pays Lambert. Sanctuary Solutions operates independently. There's no direct link between Leon and the crimes. Then how do we prove it? We don't. Not through traditional investigation. Paul closed his laptop. But I have an idea. It's risky, and you're not going to like it. I already don't like it. Leon's hosting a charity gala next week. Big donors, politicians, media coverage. He's raising money for, and I'm not making this up, child welfare organizations. The irony is almost funny. What's your plan? I'm going to attend. As a donor. Get close to Leon. Feel him out. See if I can get him to slip up. Paul, that's insane. Leon probably knows who you are by now. He knows you took down Lambert. You walk into that gala. You're putting a target on your back. I'm already a target. At least this way, I control the environment. Paul stood up, gathering his things. Listen, Aaron, I appreciate everything you've done, but the FBI's investigation is moving too slowly. By the time they have enough evidence to move on Leon, he'll have shut everything down and disappeared. This has to happen now. And if Leon tries to kill you, then I guess you'll have your probable cause. Aaron sighed heavily. You're going to do this regardless of what I say, aren't you? Yes. Fine. But you're wearing a wire. And I'm having plainclothes officers at that gala. You so much as look at me wrong, and I'm pulling you out. Deal. Paul hung up and headed home. Connie was waiting, and he knew she wouldn't be happy about his plan. But he also knew she'd understand, because Connie had been the one to dig into Lambert's background in the first place. She understood the need to stop monsters before they struck again. That night, as Emma slept peacefully in her room, Paul and Connie sat on their back porch, watching the stars. I don't like this, Connie said quietly. I know, Leon is dangerous. More dangerous than Lambert, because he's smarter. I know that too. And you're still going. Paul took her hand. I have to. If I don't, If I just walk away and let Leon continue his operation, how many more families will suffer? How many more children will disappear? Connie was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "If you're going to do this, you need to be smarter than him. You need to anticipate his moves, plan for every contingency." "I will. And you need backup. Not just Aaron. Real backup." Connie pulled out her phone and showed Paul a name, Rita Hammond. "Who's Rita Hammond?" "Investigative reporter. Used to work for the Washington Post. Now she's freelance. She's been following Jeffrey Leon for 2 years. Try to connect him to various illegal activities. She's got sources, resources, and motivation. I reached out to her yesterday." Paul raised an eyebrow. "You've been investigating Leon too?" "Of course I have. You think I'd let you do this alone?" Connie smiled slightly. "Rita's going to be at the gala, undercover as a photographer. She'll be recording everything, gathering her own evidence. Between you, her, and Aaron's team, maybe we can actually nail this bastard." Paul pulled Connie close, overwhelmed with love for this fierce, brilliant woman. "What would I do without you?" "Probably get yourself killed trying to be a hero." Connie kissed him. "So don't be a hero. Be smart, be careful, and come home to us. Always." The week passed in a blur of preparation. Paul studied Jeffrey Leon's background, his associates, his patterns of behavior. He memorized faces, names, connections. He rehearsed his cover story. Wealthy consultant looking to diversify his portfolio, interested in Leon's venture capital firm, concerned about child welfare issues. He became someone Jeffrey Leon would want to know. The night of the gala, Paul dressed in an expensive suit and stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing himself. He looked like one of them, the wealthy elite who glided through life without consequences. But underneath, he was still Paul Kemp, still a soldier, still a protector. And tonight, he was going to war. Chapter 7, The Gala. The Emerald Ballroom at the Denver Grand Hotel was a vision of opulence. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, and enough champagne to float a yacht. The city's wealthiest citizens mingled in designer clothes, their laughter echoing off marble floors. At the center of it all, Jeffrey Leon held court like a king, shaking hands and accepting praise for his generous contributions to child welfare. Paul felt revulsion twist in his gut, but he kept his expression neutral as he entered, showing his forged invitation to the security guards. The wire taped to his chest was barely noticeable under his tailored shirt, transmitting every sound to Aaron Sullivan's team in a van 3 blocks away. A waiter offered champagne. Paul took a glass he wouldn't drink. Rita Hammond was easy to spot. She moved through the crowd with a professional camera, snapping photos of donors, her press credentials hanging from her neck. She didn't acknowledge Paul, but he caught her brief nod. She was in position. Now came the hard part, getting close to Jeffrey Leon. Paul circulated, making small talk with other attendees, dropping carefully prepared comments about looking for philanthropic opportunities and concerns about vulnerable children. Within 15 minutes, a tall man in his 60s approached. Albert Hickman, according to Paul's research, Leon's business partner and chief financial officer. "Excuse me," Hickman said smoothly, "but I couldn't help overhearing your conversation with Mrs. Patterson. You mentioned an interest in child welfare initiatives." Paul turned, offering his hand. "Paul Kemp. And yes, it's something I've become passionate about recently. My daughter, well, let's just say we had a scare, made me realize how fragile safety really is." Hickman's expression was sympathetic. "I'm so sorry to hear that, but you've come to the right place. Jeffrey Leon's work in this space is truly transformative. Would you like to meet him?" "I'd be honored." Hickman led Paul across the ballroom. As they approached, Jeffrey Leon turned, and Paul got his first close look at the man who'd orchestrated so much suffering. Leon was in his late 50s, tall and distinguished with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that assessed Paul in an instant. His suit probably cost more than Paul's car. His smile was practiced perfection, warm but not too warm, interested but not desperate. "Jeffrey, I'd like you to meet Paul Kemp. He's interested in our child welfare programs." Leon's handshake was firm, his eyes calculating. "Mr. Kemp, Albert tells me you have a daughter. 5 years old. Emma." Something flickered across Leon's face, too fast to identify, but Paul caught it. Recognition, maybe, or interest. Children are our most precious resource, Leon said smoothly. It's why I've dedicated so much of my fortune to ensuring their safety and well-being. Too many children fall through the cracks of our broken foster system. I couldn't agree more, Paul said, playing his part. In fact, I've been researching various organizations, and your Sanctuary Solutions came up repeatedly. Very impressive work. Leon's eyes sharpened slightly. You've heard of Sanctuary Solutions? Most people don't know about our smaller subsidiaries. Paul shrugged casually. I do my homework before I invest. Sanctuary Solutions seems to operate very efficiently. Private foster placements, minimal government interference. Must be quite profitable. It was a calculated risk, hinting that he knew more than he should. Leon studied him for a long moment. Profitable isn't the word I'd use, Leon said carefully. But yes, we've been successful in placing children with families who genuinely want them. Sometimes the system is too slow, too bureaucratic. Children suffer while paperwork sits on desks. He leaned slightly closer. Tell me, Mr. Kemp, what exactly is your interest in child welfare? Are you looking? Let's just say I'm looking to ensure my daughter grows up in a world where children are safe, where families are protected from threats. Leon's smile never wavered, but his eyes went cold. What kind of threats? Paul met his gaze steadily. The kind that hide in plain sight. The kind that prey on vulnerable families while pretending to help them. The air between them crackled with tension. Albert Hickman looked confused, sensing something he didn't understand. Jeffrey, Hickman said nervously, perhaps we should. It's fine, Albert. Leon never broke eye contact with Paul. Mr. Kemp, why don't we discuss this in my office? I have some materials about Sanctuary Solutions that might interest you. More detailed than what's publicly available. It was a test. Maybe a threat. Paul nodded. I'd like that. Leon gestured toward a private corridor off the main ballroom. As they walked, Paul caught Rita Hammond's eye. She was following at a distance, camera ready. Paul touched his chest briefly, signaling the wire was active. Leon's office was actually a suite on the top floor, accessible by private elevator. Hickman tried to follow, but Leon waved him off. This will just be a moment, Albert. Make sure our other guests are taken care of. The elevator ride was silent. When they reached the suite, Leon poured himself a scotch without offering one to Paul, a subtle power play. So, Leon said, turning to face him fully, let's stop playing games. You're Paul Kemp, the man who took down Clyde Eastman, formerly known as Glenn Lambert, the man who destroyed one of my most valuable assets. Paul's expression didn't change. Your asset was planning to kidnap my daughter. That tended to make a man take action. Lambert was careless. Greedy. He should have stuck to the parameters I gave him. Leon swirled his scotch. But you're different. Military intelligence background. Smart. Resourceful. You could have just gone to the police, but instead you set an elaborate trap. Impressive. I did what I had to do to protect my family. And now you're here, wearing a wire, trying to get me to confess to crimes I've been careful never to commit directly. Leon smiled. Yes, Mr. Kemp, I know about the wire. I have excellent security. Your little recording will show nothing except a concerned philanthropist discussing child welfare with a potential donor. Paul's heart raced, but he kept his voice steady. Then why did you bring me up here? Because I wanted to meet the man who caused me such inconvenience. And because I want to make you an offer. I'm not interested in anything you're selling. Not even your sister's life. Paul froze. Leon's smile widened. Michelle Wagner is currently being held in protective custody. Yes. Testifying against her husband, cooperating with the FBI. But protective custody isn't perfect. Accidents happen. Witnesses disappear. And you, Leon stepped closer. You go back to your happy life with your wife and daughter, and you forget you ever heard the name Jeffrey Leon. Or Michelle has an unfortunate incident, and then perhaps your wife has a car accident, and then you're threatening my family. Paul's voice was ice. I'm offering you a choice. Walk away, and everyone lives. Keep pushing, and everyone you love suffers. Leon set down his scotch. I have resources you can't imagine. I have people in law enforcement, in the courts, in government. You think you can touch me? You're a gnat trying to fight a hurricane. Paul pulled out his phone, not the one transmitting to Aaron, but a second device. He showed Lee on the screen. It displayed a file directory full of documents, financial records, communications. While you've been talking, I've been uploading everything I found on Meridian Holdings, Sanctuary Solutions, and your private adoption network to 3 different secure servers. One belongs to the FBI, one belongs to the Washington Post, and one belongs to an anonymous whistleblower site that publishes everything automatically if I don't check in every hour. Leon's composure cracked. You're bluffing. Am I? Your accountant, Morris Swift, he's been skimming funds from Meridian Holdings for 2 years. When the FBI offered him immunity in exchange for testimony about your operations, he gave them everything. Bank records, communication logs, even recordings of your phone calls discussing merchandise and inventory. Paul smiled coldly. That's what you called the children. Merchandise. Leon's face went white, then red with rage. You have no idea what you've done. I will destroy you. I will. The suite door burst open. Aaron Sullivan and 4 FBI agents swarmed in, weapons drawn. Jeffrey Leon, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit kidnapping, human trafficking, money laundering, and about 15 other charges we're still counting up. Leon's eyes never left Paul. Even as the FBI agents handcuffed him, even as they read him his rights, he stared at Paul with pure hatred. This isn't over, Leon hissed. Yes, Paul said quietly. It is. As they led Leon away, Rita Hammond appeared in the doorway, camera in hand. Got everything on video, she said. His threats, his admission about Lambert being his asset, all of it. This is going to be the story of the decade. Aaron clapped Paul on the shoulder. Hell of a gambit, Kemp. You know you almost gave me a heart attack when you went up to that suite. Had to make him talk. Had to get him to admit his connection to Lambert. Paul felt the adrenaline finally starting to fade, leaving him exhausted. Is it enough? Combined with Morris Swift's testimony and the evidence you compiled, it's more than enough. Leon's going away for life. Aaron's expression grew serious. But Paul, he wasn't lying about having connections. We're going to need to keep your family in protective custody for a while. Some of Leon's associates might try. I know. I'm ready for that. Paul pulled out his phone and called Connie. She answered on the first ring. It's done, Paul said. Leon's arrested. It's over. Connie's sob of relief echoed through the line. Come home. Please, just come home. On my way. As Paul left the hotel, he passed through the ballroom where the gala was still in progress, though security was now herding confused guests toward the exits. These people had celebrated Jeffrey Leon, given him money and influence, never knowing the monster lurking beneath the respectable exterior. How many more monsters were hiding in plain sight? Paul pushed the thought away. He'd done what he set out to do. Lambert was in prison. Leon was in custody. The children trapped in Sanctuary Solutions would be found and returned to their families, or placed in legitimate foster care. It wasn't perfect justice. It never was. But it was something. Chapter 8, Aftermath. 3 months later, Paul sat in a federal courtroom, watching Jeffrey Leon's trial. The prosecution had presented an airtight case. Morris Swift's testimony, the financial records, the recordings, Rita Hammond's video of Leon threatening Paul and admitting his connection to Lambert. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. As they led Leon away, he didn't look at Paul. He didn't look at anyone. His empire had crumbled, his reputation destroyed, his carefully constructed facade shattered. Sanctuary Solutions had been raided, revealing 12 children held in illegal custody. All had been returned to their biological families or placed in legitimate foster care. Lambert, Clyde Eastman, had already been sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms without parole. Roy Snow got 25 years. Eddie Gorman and Marshall Hurd, who'd cooperated extensively, got 15 each. Michelle had testified against all of them, her voice shaking but steady. In exchange, the DA had agreed to probation and mandatory therapy. She'd moved to California, started a new life. Paul had spoken to her once, briefly. Maybe someday they'd rebuild their relationship. Maybe not. Some wounds didn't heal. Connie squeezed Paul's hand as they left the courthouse. Emma walked between them, chattering about kindergarten and her new friends, blissfully unaware of how close she'd come to being taken from them. "It's really over?" Connie asked quietly. "It's really over." Paul looked at his wife, his daughter, his family. "We can go back to normal life now." "Normal?" Connie laughed softly. "I'm not sure we'll ever be normal again." She was right. The experience had changed them all. Paul found himself more vigilant, more aware of threats. Emma had nightmares sometimes, even though she didn't really understand what had happened. And Connie had developed a healthy paranoia about strangers and social gatherings. But they were together. They were safe. And that was enough. That evening, Paul received an unexpected visitor. Jean Fleming stood on the doorstep, looking slightly uncomfortable in civilian clothes. "Fleming, didn't expect to see you again. Wanted to check in. Make sure you and yours were doing all right." Fleming handed him an envelope. "Also wanted to give you this." Paul opened it. Inside was a check for the full amount Paul had paid Fleming's team, plus extra. "I don't understand. Leon's assets were seized. Some of that money went to victim compensation. Your name came up. The judge agreed that you deserved reimbursement for the costs you incurred protecting your family and taking down Leon's operation." Fleming shrugged. "Plus, I added a little extra. Combat bonus." Paul tried to hand it back. "I didn't do this for money." "I know, but take it anyway. Put it toward Emma's college fund, or donate it to actual child welfare organizations. Just don't refuse it out of principle. You earned it." After Fleming left, Paul stood in his driveway, holding the check and thinking about everything that had happened. He'd gone from a peaceful birthday party to a war against kidnappers and human traffickers. He'd shot a man, manipulated criminals, hacked into illegal databases. He'd done things that kept him awake at night. But he'd also saved his daughter, saved other children, stopped monsters. Was it worth it? The moral compromises, the danger, the trauma? Paul looked through the window at Connie and Emma, laughing over some cartoon on TV. Safe, happy, together. Yeah, it was worth it. Chapter 9, New Beginnings. 6 months after Jeffrey Leon's conviction, life had settled into something resembling normalcy. Emma was thriving in first grade. Connie had written a book about the case, carefully sanitized to protect Emma's identity, that had become a bestseller, raising awareness about child trafficking. Paul had returned to his consulting work, though he'd also started volunteering with legitimate child advocacy groups. Aaron Sullivan had been promoted to lieutenant. Rita Hammond had won a Pulitzer for her investigative reporting on Leon's network. Maura Swift was in witness protection somewhere, living under a new name. And Paul was learning to sleep through the night again. It was Emma's 6th birthday party, a small gathering in their backyard, just a few close friends and family. No distant relatives, no brother-in-law, just people they trusted. As Paul flipped burgers on the grill, he felt a hand on his shoulder. Aaron Sullivan, off duty and carrying a beer. "Hell of a year, huh?" Aaron said. "That's one way to put it. I've been meaning to ask. Any regrets? About how you handled things?" Paul considered the question. He'd broken laws, manipulated people, shot someone. He'd walked right up to the line of vigilantism and maybe crossed it a few times. "No," he finally said. "I did what I had to do, what the system couldn't do fast enough. If I'd waited for proper channels, for warrants and investigations, Emma would be gone. Other children would have suffered. So no, I don't regret it." Aaron nodded slowly. "Good, because between you and me, the FBI's been getting inquiries. Other families whose children were targeted by similar networks. Trafficking rings that the system hasn't been able to crack." He pulled out a card with a phone number. "If you ever wanted to help out, unofficially, there are people who could use someone with your particular skill set." Paul stared at the card. Was Aaron seriously suggesting he become some kind of vigilante consultant? A person who operated in the shadows, outside the law, to take down criminals the system couldn't touch. "Think about it," Aaron said. "No pressure. But the world needs more people like you, Kemp. People who will actually do something when monsters come knocking." As Aaron walked away, Paul pocketed the card. He wouldn't use it. He had a family to protect, a life to live. He couldn't become someone who spent all his time hunting criminals. Could he? Emma's laugh echoed across the yard as she opened presents with her friends. Connie caught his eye and smiled, mouthing "I love you." Paul smiled back. This was what mattered. This moment, this life, this family. But as the party continued, as Emma blew out candles and made wishes, Paul felt the weight of the card in his pocket. Felt the knowledge that there were more Jeffrey Leons out there. More children in danger. More families who needed someone to stand between them and the monsters. Maybe not now. Maybe not soon. But someday, if another family needed help, Paul Kemp would be ready. Because that's what protectors did. They never stopped. They never quit. They stood in the gap between the innocent and the evil, and they paid whatever price was necessary to keep the darkness at bay. And if that made him a vigilante, a criminal, a man who broke the rules, so be it. Some rules were meant to be broken. Some lines were meant to be crossed. And some victories were worth any cost. As the sun set over his backyard, over his family's laughter and joy, Paul made himself a promise. He would never let anyone threaten his family again. And if he could help it, he'd never let anyone threaten any family again. The monsters of the world had been warned. Paul Kemp was watching, and he would always win. Author's note: this story follows Paul Kemp, a former Army intelligence officer, as he protects his family from a sophisticated kidnapping ring led by Glenn Lambert, posing as Daryl Wagner, and financed by Jeffrey Leon. Using his intelligence training and tactical skills, Paul systematically dismantles their operation through careful planning, strategic manipulation, and decisive action. The story emphasizes that Paul's victory was earned through intelligence, preparation, and moral courage. He wasn't a reckless vigilante, but a calculated protector who knew when to bend rules to save innocent lives. The antagonist's downfall was equally earned, as their own greed and cruelty provided the evidence needed to convict them. While the story leaves the door open for Paul's future involvement in protecting other families, his primary achievement remains intact. His family is safe, and the monsters who threaten them are locked away forever. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Behind the Curtain. The fluorescent lights of the department store cast harsh shadows as Roger Gordon held his 7-year-old daughter Kate's hand, navigating through the women's clothing section. It was supposed to be a simple Saturday afternoon. Kate needed new school clothes, and Melissa had claimed she was too busy with her book club to come along. "Daddy, I need to try this on," Kate said, holding up a small purple dress. Roger smiled at his daughter, the only pure thing left in his increasingly complicated world. At 35, he'd built Gordon & Associates from nothing into one of the most successful consulting firms in the city. His success had afforded them this comfortable life, but lately, something felt wrong. Melissa had become distant, secretive, always on her phone with hushed conversations that stopped the moment he entered a room. As they approached the fitting rooms, Kate suddenly froze. Her small hand gripped his with surprising strength. "Get into the fitting room now," she whispered urgently, her usual cheerful voice replaced by something Roger had never heard before: fear. Before he could ask what was wrong, Kate pushed him toward an empty fitting room and jumped in after him, pulling the curtains shut. In the cramped space, she pressed her finger to her lips and pointed toward a gap in the curtain. "Don't make a sound. Look through the gap," she whispered in his ear. Roger's blood turned to ice as he peered through the small opening. There, not 15 feet away, stood his wife Melissa in an intimate embrace with Jeremy Torres, his business partner, his best friend since college, the man who'd been the best man at their wedding 8 years ago. But it wasn't just the affair that made Roger's jaw clench. He could hear their conversation clearly. "The insurance policy is worth $3 million, Melissa was saying, her manicured fingers tracing Jeremy's chest. "Once Roger has his accident, we'll wait 6 months, then we can be together openly." Jeremy's laugh was cold. "Your husband always was too trusting. He still doesn't suspect I've been funneling clients to my side company. When he's gone, I'll have full control of the firm. What about Kate? Melissa asked, and Roger's heart stopped. Boarding school in Switzerland. She'll be out of our hair, and the trust fund will keep her comfortable. She's not really a problem. Roger felt Kate's small body trembling against him. His 7-year-old daughter had just heard her mother and his best friend casually discussing his murder and her own abandonment. The rage that filled him was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Cold, calculating, and absolute. We should go, Jeremy said. I told him I was meeting the Henderson account today, and I'm supposed to be at book club, Melissa replied with a laugh. Poor Roger, working so hard while we plan his future. They kissed again before separating, each leaving in different directions. Roger remained frozen in the fitting room, his mind already beginning to process what he'd heard. These weren't just cheaters. They were conspirators planning his death and his daughter's exile. Kate looked up at him with tears in her eyes. Daddy, what did they mean? Roger knelt down and pulled his daughter close, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. Don't worry, sweetheart. Daddy's going to take care of everything. But as he spoke those words, Roger Gordon was already transforming. The trusting husband and loyal friend was dying, replaced by something far more dangerous. Jeremy and Melissa had made a critical error. They'd underestimated the man they were trying to destroy, and they'd done it in front of his daughter. That was unforgivable. Chapter 2. The Hunter Awakens. The drive home was silent, except for the soft music playing on the radio. Kate sat in her booster seat, clutching the purple dress she'd wanted to try on but never did. Roger's hands gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles as his mind raced through the implications of what they'd witnessed. $3 million insurance policy. He'd signed those papers 6 months ago when Jeremy had suggested they both increase their coverage as successful business owners. How convenient. Daddy, Kate's small voice broke through his thoughts. Yes, sweetheart. Are you going to tell Mommy what we heard? Roger caught her eyes in the rearview mirror. His daughter was intelligent beyond her years, and she deserved honesty to a point. No, Kate. We're going to keep this our secret for now. Can you do that for Daddy? She nodded solemnly. Will you protect us? The question hit him like a physical blow. This 7-year-old was asking if he could protect them from her own mother. Always, he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. When they arrived home, their house in the upscale neighborhood looked the same, but everything had changed. The white colonial with its perfectly manicured lawn now felt like a stage set for an elaborate deception. Melissa's car was in the driveway. Remember, Roger whispered to Kate as they walked to the front door, this is our secret. Inside, Melissa was in the kitchen, wearing the same outfit she'd had on at the store, preparing dinner as if she'd been home all afternoon. How was shopping? She asked without looking up, her voice carrying its usual warm tone that Roger now recognized as completely artificial. Good. Kate found a dress she likes. Roger set the shopping bag on the counter, studying his wife's face. 8 years of marriage, and he was realizing he'd never truly known her at all. Melissa was undeniably beautiful. Blonde hair, green eyes, the kind of looks that turned heads in restaurants. She'd been working as a marketing coordinator when they met, though she'd quit after Kate was born, claiming she wanted to focus on being a mother. Now Roger wondered if she'd ever wanted to be a mother at all. How was book club? He asked casually. Oh, you know how it is. Martha's always dominating the conversation. Melissa's lie came so easily, so naturally. We're reading some mystery novel. Very predictable plot. The irony wasn't lost on Roger. Predictable can be good sometimes. Means you can see the ending coming. That evening, after Kate was in bed, Roger sat in his home office, supposedly reviewing contracts, but actually beginning his investigation. He started with the basics. Phone records, credit card statements, anything that might reveal the scope of their betrayal. What he found was worse than he'd imagined. The affair had been going on for over a year. Hotel charges, restaurant receipts, even a weekend trip to Napa that Melissa had claimed was a spa retreat with her sister. But more disturbing were the business irregularities. Jeremy had been systematically stealing clients, setting up competing contracts, and positioning himself to take over the firm. At midnight, Roger's phone buzzed with a text from Jeremy. "Sorry, I had to bail on the Henderson meeting today. Family emergency. Can we reschedule for Monday?" Roger stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. "No problem. Family always comes first." He meant every word, just not in the way Jeremy would understand. Over the next few days, Roger became a study in control performance. He went to work, came home, kissed his wife, played with his daughter, and acted like the same trusting man he'd always been. But every moment was calculated, every interaction designed to gather more intelligence. He learned that Melissa had been researching accidental death scenarios: drowning, car accidents, workplace incidents. She'd even visited the office 3 times in the past month, familiarizing herself with the building's layout and security systems. Jeremy, meanwhile, had been more subtle but equally treacherous. He'd been undermining Roger's relationships with key clients, spreading rumors about Roger's instability and poor judgment. Several clients had already begun distancing themselves from Roger specifically. The life insurance policy wasn't the end goal. It was just one piece of a larger plan to destroy Roger Gordon completely and take everything he'd built. By Friday evening, Roger had a complete picture of their conspiracy. As he sat in his office, Kate sleeping upstairs and Melissa in the living room watching television, he began planning his response. Roger Gordon had built his business on understanding people's weaknesses and exploiting them legally for competitive advantage. Now he would use those same skills for something far more personal. Jeremy and Melissa wanted to play a game where the stakes were his life and his daughter's future. Fine. But they were about to learn that Roger Gordon had been playing games at a much higher level than they'd ever imagined. And in this game, there would be only one winner. Chapter 3. The Foundation of War. Sunday morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. Melissa made pancakes while humming, Kate played with her dolls, and Roger read the newspaper like he had countless weekends before. But beneath the surface, everything had changed. Roger had spent Saturday night digging deeper into Jeremy's background, and what he discovered painted a picture of a man who'd been playing a long game for years. Jeremy Torres wasn't just a business partner who'd fallen for Roger's wife. He was a predator who'd been circling Roger's life like a vulture. The truth was uglier than simple betrayal. Jeremy had grown up in the same upper-middle-class neighborhood as Roger, but where Roger's family had worked for their success, Jeremy's had inherited wealth that they'd subsequently lost through bad investments and gambling. By college, Jeremy had been reduced to accepting charity, including the scholarship that brought him to the same business school where he'd met Roger. Jeremy had always resented Roger's natural success, the way opportunities seemed to fall into his lap, the respect he commanded without effort. When Roger had offered him a partnership in the consulting firm, Jeremy had seen it not as friendship, but as his chance to finally claim what he felt he deserved. The affair with Melissa hadn't been passion. It had been recruitment. Roger discovered that Jeremy had specifically targeted Melissa, learning her routines, her insecurities, her dreams of a more luxurious lifestyle. He'd seduced her not because he loved her, but because she was the perfect weapon against Roger. The insurance plan was just the finale of a systematic destruction that had been going on for 2 years. "Daddy, you're squeezing your coffee cup really hard," Kate observed from across the breakfast table. Roger relaxed his grip and smiled at his daughter. "Sorry, sweetheart. Daddy was just thinking about work." "Is work bad?" she asked innocently. "Sometimes people at work aren't who they pretend to be," Roger said, glancing meaningfully at Melissa, who continued buttering her pancakes without reaction. What Melissa didn't know was that her husband had been quietly investigating her background as well. The perfect wife and mother image she presented had its own dark secrets. Melissa Lawson, before she'd become Melissa Gordon, had a history of targeting successful men. Her first marriage at 21 had lasted exactly long enough to claim half of a tech entrepreneur's startup money in the divorce. Her second relationship had ended when her boyfriend's family business mysteriously burned down just after she'd been added to his insurance policy as a beneficiary. She'd never been charged with anything, but the pattern was clear. Melissa was a professional predator, and Roger had been her biggest catch yet. The realization should have devastated him, but instead, it clarified everything. This wasn't about love gone wrong or friendship betrayed. This was war, and it had been declared on him years ago without his knowledge. "I need to run to the office for a few hours," Roger announced, finishing his coffee. "Kate, want to come help Daddy with some filing?" Kate brightened immediately. She loved visiting the office on weekends, playing with the copy machine, and organizing paperclips while Roger worked. "Can't she stay home with me?" Melissa asked. "We could have a girls' day. She's been looking forward to office time," Roger replied smoothly. "Besides, you mentioned wanting to catch up on your reading." 20 minutes later, Roger and Kate were alone in his office building. While Kate entertained herself with office supplies, Roger began the real work, not filing, but planning. He accessed the building's security system, reviewed camera angles and blind spots. He studied the building's maintenance schedules, evacuation procedures, and emergency protocols. If Jeremy and Melissa were planning an accident for him here, he needed to understand exactly how they might attempt it. But more importantly, he began designing his counterstrike. Roger had always been methodical, but now he was operating with surgical precision. He created multiple scenarios, contingency plans, and fail-safes. This wouldn't be about simply exposing their plot. That would just lead to arrests, trials, and the possibility of plea bargains or reduced sentences. Roger wanted total destruction. "Daddy, what's that?" Kate asked, pointing to the building blueprints spread across his desk. "It's like a map of our building, sweetheart. Daddy's trying to make sure it's safe for everyone who works here." Kate studied the blueprints with the seriousness of a 7-year-old given an important task. "Are the bad people going to come here?" Roger knelt down to her level. "Kate, I need you to understand something important. Sometimes adults make bad choices, and when they do, they have to face consequences. Do you understand?" She nodded solemnly. "And sometimes, the people we love most need our help to stay safe. Can you help Daddy keep our family safe?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. Roger pulled her close, smelling her strawberry shampoo and feeling the weight of responsibility. Kate was the only innocent in this whole mess, and she would be protected at all costs. By Sunday evening, Roger had the framework of his plan. It was ambitious, dangerous, and absolutely ruthless. Jeremy and Melissa wanted to destroy him methodically. He would return the favor, but with the precision of a master strategist rather than the clumsiness of amateur criminals. As they drove home, Kate fell asleep in her car's seat, and Roger made a quiet promise to his sleeping daughter. By the time this was over, she would be safe, and the people who'd threatened her would understand exactly why you never attack Roger Gordon's family. The game had begun, but Jeremy and Melissa didn't know they were playing yet. That was exactly how Roger wanted it. Chapter 4. The Perfect Mask. Monday morning arrived with autumn rain drumming against the windows of Gordon and Associates. Roger sat in his office, reviewing client files while watching Jeremy through his glass door. His business partner moved through the office with easy confidence, greeting employees, discussing projects, playing the role of a dedicated professional. If Roger hadn't witnessed the conversation in the store, he would never have suspected the man plotting his death was sitting 20 feet away, sipping coffee and reviewing quarterly reports. Jeremy appeared in his doorway, wearing the same friendly smile he'd worn for 8 years. "Got a minute to discuss the Morrison account?" "Of course." Roger gestured to the chair across from his desk, studying Jeremy's face for any tell, any sign of the monster beneath the mask. There was nothing, just the same earnest expression Jeremy had worn through countless late nights building their business together. They spent 30 minutes discussing client strategies, and Roger played his part perfectly. Attentive, collaborative, trusting. He even asked Jeremy's advice on a few decisions, watching his former friend enthusiastically help him make choices that would later be used against him. "By the way," Jeremy said as he prepared to leave, "I was thinking we should update our business insurance policies. With the firm growing so quickly, we might be underprotected." Roger nodded thoughtfully. "Good point. I'll call our agent this week." "Already did. He's sending over some new proposals." Jeremy's smile was warm, fraternal. "I know you've got a lot on your plate, so I figured I'd handle the legwork." "I appreciate that, Jerry. Thanks for looking out for me." After Jeremy left, Roger sat in silence for several minutes. The casual way Jeremy had just accelerated their murder timeline was breathtaking. He wasn't just evil. He was patient, thorough, and absolutely confident in his victim's stupidity. That confidence would be his downfall. Roger spent the morning implementing phase 1 of his plan, creating the illusion of vulnerability. He began making small mistakes, forgetting meetings, misplacing files, seeming distracted and overwhelmed. Nothing dramatic, just enough to support Jeremy's narrative about Roger's declining competence. At lunch, he met with 3 key clients at separate times, each conversation carefully orchestrated. With Henderson Industries, he expressed concerns about the firm's future direction. With Coastal Shipping, he mentioned being tired and considering early retirement. With Metropolitan Bank, he hinted at family pressures affecting his judgment. To each client, he made it clear that Jeremy Torres was his most trusted partner and would be handling more of their account personally going forward. By the end of the week, word would spread through their professional network that Roger Gordon was burning out, possibly having personal problems, and that Jeremy Torres was quietly stepping up to maintain continuity for clients. It was exactly the narrative Jeremy had been building, but now Roger was accelerating it under his own control. That evening, Roger arrived home to find Melissa in an unusually good mood. She'd prepared his favorite dinner, grilled salmon with roasted vegetables, and opened a bottle of expensive wine. "What's the occasion?" he asked, kissing her cheek and inhaling the perfume that had once driven him wild but now made his skin crawl. "Can't a wife make a special dinner for her hard-working husband?" Melissa's smile was radiant, and Roger realized she was celebrating. Something had happened today that had moved their plan forward. Over dinner, she asked casual questions about his work stress, his partnership with Jeremy, whether he'd been having trouble sleeping. Each question was designed to gauge his mental state, to confirm that their psychological warfare was working. Roger played along perfectly, admitting to feeling overwhelmed, questioning some of his business decisions, even mentioning that he'd been having strange dreams. "Maybe you should take a vacation," Melissa suggested. "Just you and me. Kate could stay with my sister for a week." The suggestion sent ice through Roger's veins. Getting him alone, away from witnesses, would make their accident much easier to arrange. And separating him from Kate would ensure she couldn't inadvertently interfere with her plans. "That sounds wonderful," he said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "You always know exactly what I need." Melissa's smile was triumphant, and Roger realized she thought she was manipulating him perfectly. In her mind, she was playing a brilliant game, gradually weakening her target before delivering the killing blow. After Kate was in bed, Roger retreated to his home office while Melissa took a bath. He had 30 minutes to make progress on the next phase of his plan before she became suspicious of his absence. He pulled up the security camera footage from Jeremy's apartment building, a system he'd hacked into over the weekend using skills from his corporate espionage consulting work. For the past week, he'd been tracking Jeremy's movements, learning his routines, mapping his vulnerabilities. What he discovered was a man growing increasingly reckless. Jeremy's confidence in their plan was making him sloppy. He'd been meeting with Melissa in broad daylight, making phone calls from his office, even researching accident scenarios on his work computer. Jeremy thought he was untouchable, but he was actually creating a perfect evidence trail. Roger opened a new file on his encrypted laptop and began documenting everything, not for the police, but for his own purposes. When the time came to destroy Jeremy Torres, he wanted to have every sin cataloged and ready for retribution. "Honey," Melissa's voice called from upstairs. "Come to bed." Roger closed the laptop and smiled to himself. His wife was calling him to the bed where she lay awake at night planning his murder. The irony was almost amusing. "Coming, sweetheart," he called back. As he climbed the stairs, Roger reflected on how much his life had changed in just 1 week. 7 days ago, he'd been a trusting husband and loyal friend. Tonight, he was becoming something else entirely, something Jeremy and Melissa had created through their own betrayal. They'd wanted to destroy Roger Gordon, the successful businessman, the loving father, the trusting friend. Mission accomplished. But what they created in his place was far more dangerous than anything they planned for. Chapter 5. Setting the Board. 2 weeks into his performance, Roger had become a master of controlled deterioration. His employees whispered concerns about his distracted behavior. Clients expressed sympathy for his obvious stress, and Jeremy had begun openly discussing contingency plans for the firm's leadership. Everything was proceeding exactly as Roger intended. On a rainy Thursday morning, Roger sat in his office reviewing the latest phase of his plan when his assistant buzzed through the intercom. "Mr. Gordon, your daughter's school is online too." Roger's blood froze. Kate was supposed to be safe at school. Had they moved against her already? "This is Roger Gordon," he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Mr. Gordon, this is Principal Martinez. Kate is fine, but we need you to come in for a conference. There's been an incident." 20 minutes later, Roger sat across from Principal Martinez and Kate's teacher, Mrs. Chun, in the elementary school's main office. Kate sat beside him, looking small and defiant. "Kate has been asking some very concerning questions," Mrs. Chun began carefully. "She's been talking about bad people who might hurt her family, asking about what happens when parents die, whether children have to live with strangers." Roger felt his heart sink. His intelligent daughter had been processing what she'd heard in the fitting room, and it was affecting her behavior at school. She also drew this during art time, Principal Martinez added, sliding a piece of paper across the desk. Roger stared at the drawing, a crude but recognizable representation of a woman and man standing over a fallen figure, while a small girl hid behind a curtain. Kate had drawn the scene from the department store with startling accuracy. Has something happened at home that might have triggered these concerns? Mrs. Chun asked gently. Roger looked at his daughter, seeing the fear and confusion in her eyes. She was 7 years old and carrying the weight of adult secrets that no child should bear. "Kate, sweetheart, can you wait outside for a moment? There are some books by the secretary's desk." After Kate left, Roger made a calculated decision. "My wife and I are having some marital difficulties," he said quietly. "Kate may have overheard arguments about divorce, custody arrangements. She's probably scared about her family breaking up." It wasn't the whole truth, but it explained Kate's behavior without exposing the real danger they were in. "Children are very perceptive," Principal Martinez said kindly. "Even when parents think they're hiding problems, kids pick up on tension and conflict. We're working with a family counselor," Roger lied smoothly. "I'll make sure Kate knows she's safe and loved, regardless of what happens between her mother and me." The meeting ended with promises to monitor Kate's emotional state and recommendations for family therapy. As they walked to the car, Kate slipped her small hand into his. "Did I get in trouble?" she asked quietly. "No, sweetheart. You did nothing wrong." Roger knelt down to her level in the parking lot. "But we need to be extra careful about our secret, okay? Some grown-ups might not understand, and we need to keep you safe. Are you going to leave me and Mommy?" The question broke Roger's heart. Kate was asking if he would abandon her with Melissa, not knowing that her mother was planning to send her away to boarding school after murdering her father. "I will never leave you," Roger promised, pulling her close. "Whatever happens, Daddy will always protect you. Always." That evening, Roger's phone rang as he was helping Kate with her homework. Jeremy's name appeared on the caller ID. "Hey, partner." Jeremy's voice was warm, concerned. "I heard Kate had some trouble at school today. Everything okay?" Roger felt a chill. How had Jeremy known about the school incident? The only people who should have known were the school staff, Kate, and Melissa. She must have called Jeremy immediately after Roger told her about the meeting. "Just kid stuff," Roger replied casually. "You know how it is. Divorce rumors spread fast in small schools." "Divorce?" Jeremy's surprise sounded genuine. "Dude, I had no idea things were that bad with you and Melissa." The performance was flawless. Jeremy sounded like a concerned friend getting devastating news, not a man who'd been planning Roger's murder with the same wife he was supposedly just learning about divorcing. "We're trying to work things out," Roger said. But Kate's picking up on the tension. "Kids are smart. If you need anything, someone to talk to, help with Kate, whatever, you know I'm here for you." Roger closed his eyes, marveling at Jeremy's ability to offer help while actively destroying his life. "Thanks, Jerry. That means a lot." After hanging up, Roger sat in his home office and opened his encrypted files. Jeremy's call had confirmed something important. They were accelerating their timeline. The school incident had spooked them, probably making them worry that Kate might inadvertently reveal something dangerous. Roger pulled up the building schematics he'd been studying and cross-referenced them with the maintenance schedules Jeremy had been reviewing. There was a pattern emerging. Jeremy had been paying special attention to the building's electrical systems, specifically the areas around Roger's office. An electrical fire would be perfect. Tragic accident, complete destruction of evidence. And Jeremy would emerge as the grieving partner ready to rebuild the firm in Roger's memory. Roger leaned back in his chair and smiled coldly. Jeremy's plan was actually quite good, methodical, plausible, with minimal risk of detection. Too bad Roger knew about it. Over the next few days, Roger began the most dangerous phase of his plan. He started leaving his office door unlocked during lunch breaks, making his computer more accessible, even mentioning to Jeremy that he'd been working late nights to catch up on projects. To anyone watching, it would look like Roger was becoming careless, creating opportunities for an accident. But Roger was actually creating controlled opportunities for Jeremy to advance his plan, while ensuring every move was monitored and recorded. On Saturday morning, Roger installed the final piece of his surveillance network, a nearly invisible camera system that would capture everything happening in his office, the hallway, and the electrical room Jeremy had been frequenting. As he finished the installation, Roger's phone buzzed with a text from Melissa. "Book club is going to run late tonight. Don't wait up." Another lie, another secret meeting with Jeremy. But this time, Roger was ready. He activated his surveillance system and smiled grimly. Let them plan their final moves. Every word, every action, every betrayal would be recorded for posterity. Jeremy and Melissa thought they were closing in for the kill. They had no idea they were walking into a trap that had been designed by someone far more dangerous than they'd ever imagined. Chapter 6. The Perfect Storm. The following Monday brought news that made Jeremy's eyes light up with barely concealed excitement. The building's electrical system was scheduled for maintenance upgrades starting Wednesday, requiring after-hours work when the building would be mostly empty. "Guess I'll be working from home Wednesday night," Roger mentioned casually during their morning partner meeting. "Actually," Jeremy said quickly, "I was thinking we should both be here to oversee the work. You know how contractors can be. One mistake could damage our servers." Roger nodded thoughtfully. "Good point. I'll plan to stay late." The trap was set. That evening, Roger made his final preparations. He'd spent weeks documenting Jeremy and Melissa's conspiracy, gathering evidence, and preparing contingencies. Tonight, he would implement the last phase of his counter-operation. Kate was staying at her friend Emma's house for a sleepover, arranged by Melissa, who'd claimed she wanted to surprise Daddy with a romantic evening. The irony was perfect. Melissa thought she was clearing the house for Roger's final night alive, but she was actually ensuring Kate's safety while Roger destroyed her world. At dinner, Melissa was glowing with anticipation. She'd prepared another elaborate meal, opened expensive wine, and kept touching Roger's hand with fake affection. "You seem different lately," she said, studying his face. "More relaxed, somehow." "I've been thinking about what you said, about taking that vacation," Roger replied. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I've been pushing too hard." Melissa's smile was radiant. In her mind, she was looking at a man who'd accepted his fate, who was ready to stop fighting and let events unfold naturally. "I love you," she said, and Roger marveled at how easily the lie came to her lips. "I love you too," he replied, and meant it in his own way. He loved the memory of who he thought she was, loved the lesson she'd taught him about human nature, loved the motivation she'd given him to become something stronger. At 10 p.m., Roger's phone rang. Jeremy's voice was tense, urgent. "Roger, we got a problem at the office. The electrical work started early, and there's been a short in your office. I'm here now, but we need to secure the client files before anything gets damaged." Roger closed his eyes, listening to Jeremy perform his final act. The concern was perfect, the urgency compelling. If Roger had been the trusting fool they thought he was, he'd be rushing to the office right now to meet his death. "I'll be right there," Roger said. "Be careful driving. This rain is getting heavy." Roger hung up and looked at Melissa, who was trying to hide her excitement behind a mask of concern. "Office emergency," he explained. "Electrical problems." "Oh no," Melissa breathed. "That sounds dangerous. Maybe you should wait until morning. Can't risk losing client data. I'll be back soon." He kissed her forehead, smelling her perfume one last time, then grabbed his keys and headed for the door. But instead of driving to his office, Roger drove 3 blocks away and parked in the lot of an all-night diner. He pulled out his laptop and activated the surveillance system he'd installed in the building. On his screen, he could see Jeremy moving through the office with purpose, heading straight for the electrical room. Roger watched his former friend disable security cameras, jam door locks, and begin the process of creating what would look like a tragic accident. Jeremy was good, professional, methodical, covering his tracks as he went. But he was also completely focused on preparing his trap, unaware that he was being recorded from multiple angles by Roger's hidden cameras. At 10:47 p.m., Jeremy's phone rang. Roger couldn't hear the conversation, but he could see Jeremy nodding, checking his watch, making final adjustments to his preparations. The call had to be from Melissa, confirming that Roger was en route. Roger waited until 11:15, letting Jeremy sweat as his victim failed to arrive on schedule. Then he sent a carefully crafted text, "Storm getting worse. Taking shelter at truck stop. We'll try to get there soon." Through his cameras, Roger watched Jeremy's visible relief. The delay was explainable, wouldn't disrupt the plan, just required patience. At midnight, Roger put his plan into motion. He placed an anonymous call to the fire department, reporting smoke and strange electrical smells from his building. Then he called the police, claiming he'd seen suspicious activity around the business district. Finally, he called the local news station with a tip about a potential arson investigation. While emergency responders raced toward his building, Roger drove home. He arrived to find Melissa pacing anxiously, her phone in her hand. She'd been trying to reach Jeremy, wondering why the plan was taking so long to unfold. "Roger," she rushed to him with apparent relief. "I was so worried when you didn't answer your phone." "Battery died," Roger said simply. "The roads were too dangerous, so I came home. I'll deal with the office problems in the morning." He watched confusion and fear flicker across Melissa's face. If Roger was home safe, what was happening to Jeremy at the office? At 12:23 a.m., Melissa's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID, saw Jeremy's name, and answered with visible anxiety. "Hello." Her voice was carefully neutral, but Roger could see panic in her eyes. "Mrs. Gordon?" The voice on the other end wasn't Jeremy. It was a police officer. "This is Detective Paula Patrick with the Metro Police. We need to speak with you about Jeremy Torres." Roger watched his wife's face go white as she realized Jeremy had been caught, arrested, exposed. Her carefully planned perfect crime had somehow become a disaster. I don't understand," she stammered. "What's happened?" "Mr. Torres was arrested tonight for attempted arson and conspiracy. He's made some very serious allegations involving you and your husband. We'll need you to come in for questioning." As Melissa began to hyperventilate, Roger put his arm around her shoulders in a gesture of support that she couldn't see was actually a restraint. "Don't worry, sweetheart," he said softly. "I'm sure we can clear this all up." But Roger knew there would be no clearing up. Jeremy had been caught red-handed with enough evidence to convict him of attempted murder. And when faced with life in prison, he would inevitably implicate Melissa to try to reduce his sentence. The perfect crime had become the perfect trap, and Roger's enemies had walked into it with their eyes wide open. Now came the truly ruthless part. Chapter 7. The Reckoning Begins. Detective Paula Patrick was a 20-year veteran with sharp eyes and the kind of patient demeanor that made guilty people confess their sins. She sat across from Jeremy Torres in the interrogation room, studying the man who'd been caught with enough incendiary equipment to burn down a city block. "Let's start from the beginning, Mr. Torres," she said calmly. "What were you doing in that building at midnight with electrical components that have been modified to cause fires?" Jeremy's lawyer, A nervous public defender named Casey Hull had already advised his client to remain silent. But Jeremy was in full panic mode, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him. "You don't understand," Jeremy said, ignoring his lawyer's frantic gestures. "This wasn't my idea. I was being manipulated. Roger Gordon, my business partner, he's been planning to fake his own death for the insurance money, and he set me up to take the fall." Detective Patrick raised an eyebrow. It was a creative story. She'd give him that. "So you're saying Mr. Gordon asked you to burn down his own office?" "Not exactly." Jeremy ran his hands through his hair, realizing how insane his story sounded. "Look, I know how this looks, but I was trying to stop him. He's been acting erratically, talking about ending it all, and I thought he was going to hurt himself by burning down the building. He wanted it to look like an accident. For his daughter's sake, for the insurance. I was trying to stage it so the fire department would catch him before he could go through with it." Detective Patrick glanced at the evidence photos spread across the table. These modified electrical components suggest someone with extensive knowledge of arson techniques. "Are you an expert in fire investigation, Mr. Torres?" Jeremy's silence was answer enough. 3 hours into the interrogation, Jeremy finally broke completely. "Okay, yes, I was planning to burn down the office. But not to hurt Roger, to save him." "Save him from what?" "From his wife. Melissa Gordon has been planning to kill her husband for months. She manipulated me into helping her, threatened me, said if I didn't help her, she'd frame me for embezzlement. I was trying to create evidence of her plan before she could carry it out." Detective Patrick leaned forward. "You're saying Mrs. Gordon is planning to murder her husband?" "The life insurance, the affairs, the psychological manipulation. She's been destroying him systematically. I was gathering evidence when you arrested me." It was a masterful performance, Jeremy thought. He was repositioning himself as the hero, trying to save his friend from a murderous wife. The story had just enough truth mixed with lies to be believable. What Jeremy didn't know was that Detective Patrick had already received an anonymous package containing months of surveillance footage, financial records, and recorded conversations between Jeremy and Melissa discussing their plans in explicit detail. "Mr. Torres," Detective Patrick said quietly, "I'm going to play something for you." She activated a small digital recorder. Jeremy's own voice filled the room, crystal clear. "The insurance policy is worth $3 million. Once Roger has his accident, we'll wait 6 months, then we could be together openly." Jeremy's face went ashen as he heard himself discussing murder plans with casual enthusiasm. The recording continued, capturing every detail of their conspiracy in his own words. "Ow," he whispered. "Someone has been watching you very carefully, Mr. Torres. Someone who documented every move you made, every conversation you had, every plan you developed." Jeremy stared at the recorder in horror. "Roger. He knew. He's been playing us the whole time." Detective Patrick smiled grimly. "Mr. Torres, I'm placing you under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted arson, and fraud. Your lawyer can explain your rights." As Jeremy was led away, he kept repeating the same phrase. "He played us. He played us perfectly." Meanwhile, at the Gordon house, Melissa was pacing frantically while Roger sat calmly on the couch, ostensibly trying to reach Jeremy by phone. Still no answer. Roger said with fake concern, "I'm starting to worry something serious has happened." Melissa's phone rang, and she lunged for it desperately. But instead of Jeremy's voice, she heard Detective Patrick. "Mrs. Gordon, we need you to come to the station. Your friend, Mr. Torres, has told us some very interesting stories about you." Melissa's legs gave out, and she collapsed into a chair. "I want a lawyer." "That's your right, ma'am. But I should mention that we have some recordings you might want to hear before you make any formal statements." After Melissa hung up, she looked at Roger with wild eyes. Jeremy must have been wearing a wire. "The police have recordings of us together." Roger's expression was perfectly shocked. "Recordings of what?" "Melissa, what aren't you telling me?" Melissa tried to think of a story, any story that might explain away whatever evidence Jeremy had provided. "Jeremy's been blackmailing me. He said he loved me, threatened to destroy our marriage if I didn't meet with him. I was trying to protect our family." "Blackmail? Roger's voice was hurt, confused. Why didn't you tell me? We could have gone to the police together. Melissa realized she was trapped. Whatever Jeremy had told the police, whatever evidence they had, she was already implicated. Her only hope was to convince Roger that she was a victim too. I was scared, she whispered. Jeremy said he would ruin your business, destroy everything we'd built. I thought I could handle it myself. Roger knelt beside her chair and took her hands gently. Sweetheart, we'll get through this. Whatever Jeremy has done, whatever lies he's told, we'll face it together. Melissa began to cry, partly from relief that Roger seemed to believe her, partly from terror about what was coming next. What she didn't know was that Roger was recording every word of her confession, adding it to the massive evidence file he'd been building for weeks. I love you, she sobbed. I never wanted any of this to happen. I know, Roger said softly, stroking her hair. But we need to call our lawyer now. We need to protect our family. As Melissa cried against his shoulder, Roger smiled coldly over her head. Jeremy was in custody, facing life in prison. Melissa was about to be arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder. But Roger wasn't finished. The real revenge was just beginning. Chapter 8. No Mercy. The next morning brought a media circus that transformed the quiet suburban neighborhood into a war zone of satellite trucks and reporters. News crews camped outside the Gordon house, drawn by the salacious story of a successful businessman whose wife and business partner had conspired to murder him. Roger stood at his living room window, watching reporters practice their opening lines for the morning broadcasts. Kate had been safely transported to his sister's house before dawn, protected from the chaos that was about to engulf their world. They're calling it the perfect marriage murder plot, Melissa said flatly from the kitchen table, where she sat surrounded by legal documents. Her lawyer, Alan Hastings, was an expensive criminal defense attorney who specialized in high-profile cases. Mrs. Gordon, Hastings said carefully, the evidence against you is substantial. The recordings, the financial records, the surveillance footage, the prosecution has built a very strong case. Melissa looked at Roger desperately. You believe me, don't you? You know I would never hurt you. Roger sat beside her and took her hand. To any observer, he looked like a devoted husband standing by his wife in her darkest hour. I believe you were manipulated, he said gently. Jeremy took advantage of your kindness, your trust. But we need to understand exactly what evidence the police think they have. What Roger knew, and Melissa didn't, was that the evidence wasn't just substantial, it was overwhelming. Because Roger had provided all of it. Over the past month, he'd systematically documented every aspect of their conspiracy. The hotel receipts, the phone records, the insurance paperwork. Everything had been carefully preserved and annotated. But more damning were the recordings Roger had made of Jeremy and Melissa's conversations, captured by surveillance equipment they'd never suspected. There's something else, Hastings said reluctantly. Mr. Torres is claiming that you were the mastermind of the entire plot. He's saying you seduced him, manipulated him, and threatened him with false embezzlement charges if he didn't cooperate. Melissa's face went white. That's not true. Jeremy approached me. He said Roger was planning to leave me, that he wanted to help me secure my future. Can you prove that? Hastings asked. Melissa fell silent, realizing that her word against Jeremy's wouldn't be enough. Roger squeezed her hand supportively. We'll figure this out, sweetheart. The truth always comes out. But Roger knew the truth had already come out, carefully, methodically, and exactly as he'd planned. That afternoon, Detective Patrick arrived with a warrant for Melissa's arrest. Roger held his wife as she cried, whispering reassurances while she was handcuffed and led away. I'll call the lawyer, he promised. I'll get you the best defense money can buy. And he meant it. Roger wanted Melissa to have excellent legal representation because he wanted her trial to be thorough, public, and devastating. He wanted every detail of her betrayal exposed, every lie dissected, every manipulation revealed. After the police left, Roger sat alone in his house for the first time in weeks. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant voices of reporters still camped outside. He opened his laptop and reviewed the final phase of his plan. Jeremy and Melissa were facing murder conspiracy charges that would likely result in life sentences. But prison wasn't enough for Roger. He wanted total destruction, complete annihilation of everything they cared about. Jeremy's arrest had already triggered an investigation into the consulting firm's finances. Roger had carefully planted evidence suggesting that Jeremy had been embezzling funds for years, manipulating client accounts, and preparing to flee the country with stolen money. Jeremy's reputation in the business community was destroyed. No one would ever trust him again, even if he somehow avoided conviction. Melissa's destruction would be more personal. Roger had discovered that her parents, who lived in a retirement community in Florida, had no idea their daughter was capable of murder. Her sister, a teacher in Colorado, had been horrified to learn about the charges. Melissa's entire family network was collapsing as people distanced themselves from the scandal. But Roger wasn't finished. He'd also discovered that both Jeremy and Melissa had hidden assets they'd been planning to use after his death. Money moved to offshore accounts, property purchased under false names, investments made in preparation for their new life together. Roger had systematically exposed every hidden asset to the IRS, triggering tax fraud investigations that would result in additional criminal charges. Even if they somehow beat the murder conspiracy charges, they'd still face federal tax evasion prosecutions. There would be no escape, no plea bargains, no reduced sentences. Roger had ensured that Jeremy and Melissa would spend the rest of their lives paying for their betrayal. As evening fell, Roger's sister Evelyn called to check on him. "How are you holding up?" she asked gently. "I'm surviving," Roger replied. "It's hard to believe people I trusted could do something like this. Kate's asking about you. She doesn't understand why Mommy can't come home." Roger closed his eyes. His daughter was the only innocent victim in this whole mess, and protecting her from the full truth would be his greatest challenge. Tell her Mommy made some bad choices and has to go away for a while. Tell her Daddy loves her and will never let anything bad happen to her. Roger, what happens now? With custody, with Kate's future? Roger had already consulted family law attorneys, prepared guardianship documents, and established trust funds. Kate would be financially secure for the rest of her life, and she would never have to see Melissa again unless she chose to. "Kate will be fine," Roger said quietly. "I'll make sure she's protected from all of this." After hanging up, Roger walked through his empty house, remembering the life he'd thought he was living just weeks ago. The man who'd trusted Jeremy and loved Melissa was gone, replaced by someone harder, colder, infinitely more dangerous. Jeremy and Melissa had wanted to destroy Roger Gordon, the trusting husband and loyal friend. Mission accomplished, but they created something far worse in his place. A man who understood that mercy was weakness, that forgiveness was stupidity, and that some betrayals demanded absolute retribution. Tomorrow, the trials would begin, and Roger would be there for every moment, watching his enemies face the consequences of their choices. They'd taught him that the world was full of predators who viewed kindness as vulnerability. He'd learned the lesson well. Chapter 9. Scorched Earth. 6 months later, the trials were over. Jeremy Torres had been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted arson, and fraud. He tried to claim mental illness, temporary insanity, manipulation by Melissa, every defense his lawyers could devise. None of it worked. The evidence was too overwhelming, the premeditation too clear, the intent too obvious. Melissa Gordon received the same sentence. Her trial had been even more devastating, as prosecutors painted her as the true mastermind who'd seduced Jeremy into murder for insurance money. Her lawyers' attempts to portray her as another victim had crumbled under the weight of surveillance footage, showing her researching accident scenarios and discussing Kate's boarding school arrangements. Roger had attended every day of both trials, sitting in the front row, his face a mask of sorrowful dignity. To the media and public, he was the perfect victim, a successful man who trusted the wrong people and nearly paid with his life. He gave measured interviews about forgiveness and moving forward, about protecting his daughter from the trauma of betrayal. But there was more to his revenge than prison sentences. The Gordon house sat empty now, listed for sale as part of the divorce proceedings. Roger had moved with Kate to a new city, a fresh start where his daughter could grow up without the shadow of her mother's crimes. Kate, now 8, was thriving in her new school. She'd been through extensive therapy to process what she'd witnessed, and while she still had nightmares occasionally, she was beginning to heal. She rarely asked about Melissa anymore, accepting Roger's explanation that some people make choices that hurt their families and have to face consequences. Jeremy's family had disowned him completely. His parents, wealthy retirees who'd already been embarrassed by their son's failures, publicly denounced him and changed their wills to remove any mention of his name. His sister, a respected physician, had moved across the country to escape the scandal. Melissa's family had been equally devastated. Her parents had sold their retirement home and moved to a small town where no one knew their name. Her sister had lost her teaching job when parents complained about having a murderer's relative working with their children. But Roger's revenge went deeper than public humiliation. He discovered that Jeremy had a teenage son from a previous relationship, a boy named Benjamin who'd been planning to attend college on his father's financial support. Roger had anonymously established a scholarship fund for the boy, ensuring he could get his education despite his father's crimes. The scholarship came with one condition. Benjamin had to legally change his last name, severing all connection to the Torres family. For Melissa's elderly parents, Roger had arranged for their medical debts to be mysteriously paid off by an anonymous benefactor, while simultaneously ensuring they received detailed reports about their daughter's prison conditions. They would spend their remaining years grateful for unexpected financial relief while knowing exactly what their daughter had become. Every act of apparent kindness was actually another twist of a knife, a reminder that Roger Gordon's reach extended far beyond prison walls. On a cold February evening, Roger sat in his new office overlooking the city skyline. His consulting firm had been rebuilt from scratch, larger and more successful than before. The publicity from the trials had paradoxically brought him more business. Clients were drawn to the man who'd survived such dramatic betrayal and emerged stronger. His phone rang, and his assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Gordon, you have a visitor. Jeremy Torres's lawyer is here." Roger smiled coldly. "Send him in." Casey Hull entered the office looking defeated and desperate. Jeremy's former public defender had been struggling since the trial, his career damaged by association with such a high-profile loss. "Mr. Gordon, thank you for seeing me," Hull said nervously. "I'm here about Jeremy Torres." "What about him?" "He wants to make a deal. He claims he has information about other crimes, other people who might be in danger. He's willing to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence." Roger leaned back in his chair, studying the lawyer's face. "What kind of information?" "He won't say unless he gets guarantees about sentence reduction. But he claims there are other cases, other conspiracies he was involved in before he met your wife." "How interesting." Roger's voice was calm, disinterested. "And what does this have to do with me?" "He specifically asked me to approach you. He said you're the only person who might be willing to listen, to help facilitate a deal with the prosecutors." Roger was quiet for a long moment, considering the implications. Jeremy was trapped in a cage of his own making, desperate enough to invent new crimes just for the chance of a slightly smaller cage. "Mr. Hull," Roger said finally, "Jeremy Torres tried to murder me for money. He conspired with my wife to destroy my family. Why would I help him with anything? He said to tell you that he knows you're not the man you pretended to be during the trial. He said you'd understand what that means." Roger's expression didn't change, but his eyes grew colder. Jeremy had figured out that Roger had orchestrated his own capture, that the victim had actually been the puppet master all along. "Tell Mr. Torres that I'm exactly who I appeared to be during the trial, a man who believes in justice, consequences, and protecting his family. If he has information about other crimes, he should share it with the proper authorities out of civic duty, not for personal gain." Hull shifted uncomfortably. "He won't cooperate without guarantees." "Then he won't cooperate." Roger stood up, indicating the meeting was over. "Good day, Mr. Hull." After the lawyer left, Roger returned to his desk and opened a secure file on his computer. Inside were detailed plans for the next phase of his life. New business ventures, political connections, social organizations. He was building something larger than revenge now, creating a network of influence that would ensure his family was never vulnerable again. The phone on his desk chimed with a text message. Kate's babysitter was confirming pickup times for tomorrow's school events. Roger smiled, thinking about his daughter's art show tomorrow evening. Kate had painted a picture of their new house, complete with a garden where she wanted to plant flowers in the spring. She was 8 years old and already planning for the future, confident that her father would keep her safe. At 9 p.m., Roger drove home to their new house, a beautiful colonial in a gated community where Kate could ride her bicycle safely and make friends whose parents had been carefully vetted by private investigators. Kate was already in bed, but she'd left a note on his pillow. "Daddy, thank you for taking care of us. I love you more than all the stars." Roger held the note for a long moment, thinking about the man he'd been a year ago, trusting, optimistic, believing the best about people. That man was gone, murdered as surely as Jeremy and Melissa had intended to murder his body. But from his ashes had risen something stronger, more capable of protecting what mattered. Roger Gordon no longer believed in forgiveness or second chances. He'd learned that mercy was a luxury that good people couldn't afford in a world full of predators. Jeremy and Melissa had taught him that lesson in the cruelest way possible, and he learned it well. In the distance, thunder rolled across the night sky, promising storms ahead. But Roger wasn't worried about storms anymore. He'd become the storm, and his enemies had learned too late that some tempests show no mercy